Hello and welcome to the Dead End Introductions of Losers. My name is Chris. I'm here with an illegal Danish immigrant.
My name is Mord.
Well, yes. Today we're going to talk about various topics, mainly first day launch experiences and what to look out for, what to avoid. And I want to touch on another subject at the end of the video, but we'll leave that for the end of the video. Let's start with um, my favorite launch experience, which was Diablo 3. Now, we both experienced Diablo 3, the launch, and it is by far the worst 3 days I've ever had in my entire life.
Yeah, that was an interesting launch experience with many different crashes and failures that took Blizzard weeks to address and still came back long after that as well. Um, Mainly there was one error that was very big that just made you unable to log in, and you could have it for a day straight. You simply couldn't play the game you purchased, especially during high traffic. The game would simply just lock you out and then keep you locked out, even if you were logged in, which was just horrible to many players who'd been looking forward to this game for a long time.
Exactly. What it also would do sometimes is you would be playing the game fine and dandy. You know, every now and then you get a bit of lag, and then you get the horrible message of you have been disconnected. You relaunch the game because that's what Diablo makes you do, and then you find out that you get the fucking error message. This is excruciating. This was excruciating, and Blizzard did not hear the end of this for a fair few months. I think it was. I think it was 3 or 4 months that players were just furious with Blizzard and its developers about how this could happen. A multi-million-dollar company that
Indeed.
has many experiences with launches, with WoW expansions, which is probably in its time it was the biggest launch in the gaming industry. It was WoW expansions. They had experiences with that. Now, that's I'll be fair. They weren't good at that either. But granted, it did give them experience. So when you launch a game like Diablo 3, you expect it to, carry over some of that experience, and maybe it'll be bad, sure, because it's Blizzard. But maybe, just maybe, it won't be as bad as everyone thought it would be. But no, how wrong we were. Oh man.
Especially since it was a game that had been anticipated for about 10 years.
About 10 years.
Yeah, a fan favorite in the dungeon crawler category. Uh, it, it was supposed to live up to many expectations, but then the Era 37 came along and just ruined it all. And it's still a meme to this day in the Diablo 3 community, which is quite incredible. That's how bad it was. And
7 years ago, was it?
7 years ago.
7 years ago, and it's still a meme.
Yeah, indeed. It was it was the biggest meme for many years in the Diablo community. And that was just one of many errors. There were other errors, especially with the auction house, where you simply couldn't buy or sell stuff. It would just give you an error, and then you could try again another time. um, and the fact that the game ended up being all about grinding gold at that point, uh, running around in your magic find gear to open chests and then restarting, which was. But that's not the launch. That's the game itself that was forward there. However, Reaper of Souls was actually quite good in that regard.
I do wholeheartedly agree. We both played once again on the launch day of Reaper of Souls, and we played a lot actually. We did the 60 to 70 grind on the launch day, and we also did a fair few Paragon levels past the 60-70 on the launch day itself. I think we played for a grand total of like 10 to 11 hours on the launch day.
Yeah,
And
something like that.
as far as I remember, I didn't get disconnected a single time. There was lag, yes, of course, but I didn't get disconnected. I didn't crash. I didn't have any errors. And as far as I know, you didn't either.
I did not know. I even played in the morning when, like, right after it was released, and there was absolutely no problems. Not even in public lobbies.
So Blizzard's showing the world that they can do it. They just, for some reason, are very inconsistent when it comes to launches. Because I don't mistake yourself when you think, okay, well, Diablo 3 not that big of a game. It's not as big as World of Warcraft. The Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls launch was huge. There was so many people playing it. It wasn't frankly as big as a WoW expansion, but it was close. And for them to nail a launch like that perfectly means they can do it. But for some reason, they just don't get it right.
Indeed. And if we move over to the game you named there, WoW, we can see that they never really get that right. Which is incredible because they have the numbers from the previous launches. They have the amount of people pre-ordering. They, of course, don't have the amount of people. They don't know the amount of people who pre-ordered a physical copy or going out to buy a physical copy on launch day. However, the fact that ever since MOP, the launches for many people, except the lucky few who either get out ahead or just don't get hit at all, have been quite awful, is really disappointing. Like, it dates all the way back to... You said you played in Cataclysm, right?
Yes, I did.
How was the launch there?
It was frankly it was better than expected, and I'll tell you why. It's because they upped the marketing for Cataclysm by well, quite a huge amount. They did television marketing, which they did with Wrath of the Lich King, fair enough, but they did way more for Cataclysm, and they didn't quite expect the impact it would have on the amount of people that would play on launch day. And that is the only problem they had. They didn't have the capacity. They didn't have the amount of servers to hold the amount of players that wanted to play. And this was really the only problem with the Cataclysm launch.
Yeah, and then moving on to the next launch, where we see that they ended up having a lot of issues with this that really should have been fixed after the Cataclysm launch, with the expectancy with MOP, Mr. Pandaria, where I personally didn't have many issues except the lag, but many people simply couldn't hit mobs at all for days because it was they were simply some of the unfortunate people who didn't get to play the game due to the servers being super awful. However, it was more of a coin flip there than in the later ones where it included almost everyone.
The later one's talking about Warlords of Draenor.
Yes, Warlords of Draenor, and some in Battle for Azeroth. But Warlords took the cake. It was simply awful. I got in queue, so I got to start playing an hour and a half after the game, the expansion had launched, which made it so there was no mobs to be able to kill. Back then you fought over mobs, they weren't shared. And it was simply impossible. The same with resources on the ground. You had to pick up planks, as far as I remember, for your garrison. And this was playing with 200, 300 MS for days, unless you were ahead. If you were ahead, you got out of the starting zones, and you didn't have much lag. However, for the rest of the players, there were massive queues on the most popular realms that took hours upon hours to get through. You could basically leave your PC on at night, and maybe you'd be on your realm the next day, or maybe you'd still be in queue. It was you weren't actually sure, especially in the biggest realms. And it was even so bad, people didn't get to play due to this queue and many other issues, that the League subreddit, not the League, the World of Warcraft subreddit shut down for a few days because the head mod was so unhappy with Blizzard's launch. So this is by far the worst launch. It
sounds very similar to the Cataclysm launch, but the only comparison is that this was
the most hyped Blizzard World of Warcraft expansion.
Well, yes, and it was also
Cata,
5 years later.
Yes, indeed. Later. And it was an expansion that was supposed to rejuvenate WoW after Hemorrhage subscribers late, Mr. Pandaria. And really didn't do well in that
It
regard.
tried.
It tried and it failed.
The introduction of the garrison really set a lot of people off.
Indeed,
It turned me off personally. I
yes,
hated it.
same. You've and keeping an alt was suddenly a chore, even more than it usually was, and that just became even worse in Legion and further on. Um, but the biggest problem was definitely the fact that people couldn't get in, and for weeks after, like weeks, people couldn't get sometimes couldn't get into their own garrison. They just run around and they couldn't get in because the garrison servers were full or something. I don't remember.
And I want to add on for people that don't play World of Warcraft, the garrison was your own personal area of the game. There was no one able to come into your garrison unless they were in your party.
Yes, so in theory you should go into a private instance, but you simply weren't allowed. Many times you just go into a garrison with other people and you couldn't interact with anything, and neither could they, simply because the system was broken for weeks, which was quite incredible. And then there was the Balfasters launch, which once again had the same problem with if you didn't get out ahead, you kept getting randomly disconnected, and maybe you couldn't log in for half an hour, and then you can maybe log in again. Many of my guildies had this problem. I got out ahead, so I had no disconnects. I leveled from 110 to 120, I think it was, yeah. With no problems. However, so many people had problems, although it was not nearly as bad as WoD, and the server lag was significantly lower. Also, the fact that mobs were shared now meant that it was much, much easier. There wasn't this big fight over just tagging mobs anymore, which was great for launch. It was absolutely amazing.
Big improvement.
Indeed.
And now I want to move on to another Blizzard game, which is Hearthstone.
Oh boy.
Which over the years has been causing quite the ruckus amongst gamers. Hate it or love it, it's there, and it's a big pillar in the strategy and card game genre. Now I played in the open beta of Hearthstone. I played it a lot, and I still play it to this day. But nothing was quite as bad as all the launches were. All the launches for the expansions and stuff. I mean, they went rather smoothly for Blizzard standards. I mean, it could be better, could be worse. It was okay. 5 out of 10 experience on the launch days usually. But the first real proper expansion they did for Hearthstone was an absolute clusterfuck. Now, I'll pass along to you to talk about this a little more, because I quite frankly have forgotten most of it. I might have blocked it out. I don't remember. It might have been traumatizing, but take it away.
Are you saying Nax is out? Oh boy. Yes. Naxxramas was the first expansion, the first real adventure for Blizzard here, and in Hearthstone, and it was just awful. I played on my iPad for the launch, which might have been different from PC. However, you could not do anything. You got into a match or you got into a boss encounter, and you'd get disconnected. You'd randomly get disconnected, and maybe you couldn't log in for maybe you could log in instantly. Maybe you couldn't log in for half an hour. It was completely random, and there was also massive lag. And considering Nax was a single player adventure, this was not very well received, because you didn't save your progress on the bosses, so you couldn't just reconnect and continue the fight. You had simply lost, even though it was a single player. So in theory you should have all the time in the world, but you didn't.
In theory.
And especially once you got to the heroic bosses, which are just harder versions of the normal bosses that generally have more health. Their cards do more damage, more card draw, more. They just do more, so it was harder.
Yeah.
when people started doing those and then kept getting disconnected, people got really annoyed.
I do remember the outrage that came from the constant disconnects. And I myself, I think why I don't remember much of it, because I did try to play on launch, and I did play for a little bit, but then eventually I just gave up. I frankly just gave up.
Same.
Which is I was about to say, which is what a lot of people I reckon did. They just
Yeah.
gave up eventually and thought, well, fuck it. I won't play on launch. I'll just wait until the shitstorm is over and then I'll get to play the game. And then having touched on Hearthstone, because Hearthstone isn't taking the world by storm with each expansion. I mean, every expansion from Nax until now has been rather smooth. I want to touch on another game, which is Call of Duty, which has recently moved over to the Battle.net launcher. Now, I myself have not played Black Ops 4, but Mort has a lot actually, and
Yes.
he can share his thoughts.
It's actually, it was a quite smooth launch. I played both multiplayer and Blackout on launch, and I have had no problems in either, no lag, and usually the servers have been good. Sometimes everyone's been lagging, but that's like the CSGO server. Sometimes everyone just lags in them because it's a bad server. So that's been very good. There's been no issues. There's been a lot of bugs. Of course, balancing issues, but Treyarch has actually been good at handling those so far. And then there's zombies. It's super fun, however it crashes. I tried to do the IX Easter egg, I think about 6 times before I actually got it done. And the 6 times I failed wasn't because I died. It was because the game died. It simply crashed, and it's different crashes. And they haven't fixed it yet. They released a patch today, so hopefully that fixes it. On most of them, but I've heard also from the Call of Duty subreddit that every map crashes. It's so hard to do Easter eggs right now due to inconsistency in the game. Like you can get all the way to the boss and then just crash, and then you have to do it all over again. And I've also had multiple times in just a public lobby where you just crash. You sub round 10, you crash, and that shouldn't happen in a polished AAA game. So the zombies launch, while the mode is super fun and the maps are great, has been suboptimal due to the crashes. It's 3 weeks in now, and they're still not completely fixed.
I figure we can't even call it a launch at this point anymore.
Yeah, at this point, it's not really launch. No,
it's past launch. I mean, this might still be launch day problems, but this is not launch anymore.
Yeah, indeed, and the problems still persist, and that's while I understand it takes a while to fix. It shouldn't have been released with this many crashes, because many people simply have had told stories about having 20 plus attempts on an Easter egg and crashing every time. That's unacceptable.
It's unacceptable, exactly. And now I want to move on to something else that is completely unacceptable in the same genre as Black Ops 4, which is the Battlefield 4 launch and the nightmare that was Battlelog.
Oh, Battlelog. Glad that they put that into the ground. But I didn't play this, so but you did. So what do you know about that? How was your experience?
Well, I fought long and hard with the release of Battlefield 4. I didn't fight in the game, unfortunately, which is what everyone set out to do. I fought with Battlelog. The reason why Battlelog was so god awful is because, first of all, finding a server was nearly impossible with the amount of traffic that the Battlelog website was getting. The website was slow. It was constantly giving me 404s, constantly giving me errors, stuff like that. It was just the term I can think of right now is that it was unacceptable. I mean, you decide to introduce something as risky as Battlelog, and then wham bam titty slam, here it goes, and it's fucked. It was completely fucked. For the first, I want to say, week, Battlelog did not function properly. People were complaining. People were, DICE even acknowledged most of the complaints. Look, we know it's bad. And that was just about the end of it. It was just, we know it's bad. And then eventually it got better because a lot of people were saying, fuck it, I'm not doing this. And then the traffic got lower because a lot of people said, fuck it. And then DICE said, oh, we fixed it. Well, let me tell you, motherfuckers, that is not exactly how you fix something. You don't just let the shit stay until it weeds out and then you say you fixed it. That's not how it works. You actually have to fix something in order for you to say you fixed it. Because in this case, they just let it to fix itself, which was one of the most awful experiences and probably the most disappointed I've ever been with a game launch. because the neglect that DICE showed Battlelog and Battlefield 4 was awful, and they didn't give you the option until much later into Battlefield 4 that you could have an in-game server browser, which is what everyone preferred. Battlelog is what no one asked for, what no one deserved, and what no one thought of. Yet they still implemented it, which was frankly disappointing and probably one of the biggest mistakes DICE has ever made, and one of the biggest mistakes DICE will ever make.
And how long has Battlelog had problems? Since its launch and until it got killed, pretty much.
Yeah, well, yes, until it got killed. But it's still active to this day. But you have the option to go to an in-game server browser, which is what most people turn to. Excuse me, nowadays. Except for that, they still force you, if you want to do, for instance, platoon things or squad things, you still are forced to move to Battlelog because you can't make a platoon in game. You have to go to Battlelog for that. If you want to invite your friends to the platoon, you can't do that in game. You have to do that on the Battlelog. So somehow they're still trying to make Battlelog relevant. It's you can put a tie and a nice suit on a piece of shit, but it's still going to be a piece of shit, DICE. So please just let Battlelog go, accept it was a failure, and move on to bigger and better things.
Indeed.
And speaking of bigger and better things, Origin Access and Battlefield 5. Now, I recently became an Origin Access user, and I must say I have been terribly pleased by it so far.
But why?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because €15 a month for over 155 games, full access, most of the DLCs that you can get for a game. For instance, Dragon Age Inquisition. If you pay €15 a month, you get 155 games, including Dragon Age Inquisition and all of its DLCs. And there's a lot. There's a lot of DLCs. You get early access to Battlefield 5. You get to preload it, is what I mean. You get all of the Battlefields. Well, all of them that are on Origin, I believe, except for Battlefield Bad Company 2. I'm not sure you get that. You might. I don't know exactly. But I do have the €15 package. There is another package. It's €4 a month.
What does that do?
Well, you get if I'm not wrong, you get 10 hours of gameplay time for every game that the Premier users also get. Premier is the €15 a month package, which I think is incredible value as well. I mean, €4 a month for basically 10 hours of game time in games that some even have a storyline of 10 hours of under. So you could complete the single player mode of a game for just about €4 a month, and you can do this for 155 different games, and it's tremendous. It's phenomenal.
And how many people do actually end up? Like, you have so many games here that spending 10 hours in one game and then 10 hours in another game, if you're working or something, then that's probably all the time you have to play anyways in a month if you're really busy. So that's even that seems really good.
Yes, exactly. Getting to pay €4 a month for 20 hours a month, 20 gameplay hours a month. You say that's all the free time you have. Paying €4 for that is even incredible value, in my opinion. Yeah. Now, I know that the Microsoft Store, the Microsoft Game Store, has a similar offer, but I don't think the game lineup is quite there to
compete.
Yeah, well, to compete and to quite justify. That's what I was looking for. To justify the price tag they put on a monthly. I think it's €20 a month, if I'm not wrong. And they do have some massive titles in there, like Forza Horizon, which is just a phenomenal game. But that is just about the only game. There was a few others, but that is the only big game I can think of off the top right now that I would want in all of the games you get from that monthly package. And I'm not paying €20 a month just to play Forza Horizon 4. I would just buy the game straight up. So Origin Access overall, it's an absolute 10 out of 10 for me, an absolute recommender. Even the basic package is phenomenal.
That's good. And especially with the upcoming launch of Battlefield 5. It seems.
And don't forget, even if you're a casual PC gamer, games like FIFA 19, you get lots of extras for FIFA 19. You get the whole base game, you get everything you would get in the deluxe edition, plus more. And you got early access to it as well, but I got it after FIFA 19 was released, so I didn't get that. But you did get that. So even for the casual PC gamer that's not into hardcore games like Battlefield, there's still things like City Skylines, Mirror's Edge, Burnout Paradise, FIFA. As I was just saying, it's just tremendous value for every type of gamer.
It's pretty good.
It is pretty good. And on that note, I would like to say thank you for watching.
Thank you.
And don't forget to leave a comment on what you think, what your personal experiences has been with launch days and first day experiences. And as always, we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Goodbye.